Alright, we're back with more Rubinstein French stuff. I'm going to talk a little, I think, just about studying openings, because I think people often have the habit of you study an opening once, you think you've learned it. Often openings are advertised as, here's an opening for life, which is reasonable, but here's an opening you only have to study once. You'll never have to study the opening again because you'll just have this opening. And it's this idea of the opening as this one-time process, this static thing that you now have, instead of ongoing learning. So you often see players who learn their openings, they're at a, say, 1500 level, they learn their openings at a 1500 level, and then they get better, and suddenly their openings aren't so good. Because the openings were never treated as this ongoing thing you're improving and getting better at like the rest of the game. I think players often also play systems. And the Rubinstein French isn't, it's a real opening, but, we follow the same patterns a lot. But players get so used to playing the same patterns, they stop considering when they work and when they don't work. And openings should be an ongoing process of improvement where we see new ideas, we see new lines, we improve our lines constantly. And so I focused in the first few videos on the Rubinstein, I focused first on just themes. What are the core ideas? Let's understand what we're trying to do before we delve in. And then the second video I did was, let's see a lot of positions, and let's consider them, let's talk about them, let's try to figure out what's going on and what the moves should be, and get a lot of practice playing positions, but not practice where we don't then think about it. Because a lot of times you'll play a lot of blitz games. Great. And then you will never look at them, you'll never consider them. You'll get some practice with the structures, you'll get better at it, but at some point the fact that you haven't been studying it recently will catch up. And I think players' openings often can get weaker over time, even as you get more used to the structures. So I started with themes, then I moved on to making a lot of decisions and talking them through. Now we're going to do a guess the move, where we're going to play through, I think, a really nice game in the Rubinstein French. Eric Hansen, who streams a lot and many people will be familiar with, playing against Meier, a hero of the Rubinstein French, and Meier absolutely obliterates him. So we're going to go through the game, and after each white move, please stop the video and think about what would you do. And if you guess the correct move or a similarly good move, take a point. If you do not, or you guess a bad move, do not take a point. See how well you score. So white plays e4. Pause. I will not say pause after each move, but I'll wait a few seconds and let you pause if you choose to, do this as a guess the move. You can also do this as just see a nice game in the Rubinstein French, that's fine. But of course we play the French. And the French continues with d5, immediately attacking the center. Now against knight c3 or knight d2, we can enter the Rubinstein French with d4. And our idea is to trade one pair of knights by playing knight d7, preparing knight f6. I hope you've gotten everything right so far. If you've watched the previous videos and not, then I really messed up in explaining stuff. Yep, we're trading a pair of knights. And white pins the knight. Okay, black has a few good rejoinders here. Bishop e7 makes a lot of sense, and I have played it in this position, and when I end up showing all the opening preparation, the lines I've set up, I will recommend bishop e7 as the move here. Meier goes for h6, another move that, immediately tries to deal with the pin. c5 is also okay, though I think a little worse here. I like dealing immediately with the pressure here. One point on bishop e7 is if they take, or say if they take knight, we'll often take back bishop, with the idea that we really want that knight on f6, so we'll trade the bishops, and then we'll get our knight to f6. So h6 is played here, but if you played any of the other moves, take full credit. Okay, so a lot of the times it's okay to play gf6, especially if our king's in the center. Here, though, I do not like it, because we still have this knight on d7. If, for instance, these knights had been swapped, then, okay, we couldn't play queen f6 there, because we just lose the queen, but say this knight and this bishop had been swapped, and we were choosing between queen f6 and gf6. Which should we choose? I think both are defensible. Here, however, if we play gf6, we lose a good square for the knight, and that's pretty uncomfortable, because then we don't really know what to do with that piece. So knight f6 is definitely the correct move. Okay, I haven't talked much about lines where the white bishop goes to e3, and there's a really frequent way to inconvenience the bishop is to play knight d5, and this is the main move here. Hansen-Meier does not play it. I think it's kind of sharp. White retreats the bishop, black plays c5, always bc5ing, ABC, always bc5ing. But white can play bishop e5 or knight e5 in some order, and it's kind of annoying. So I do not recommend that in the lines I recommend. Bishop e7 is totally fine. If you said that, that's fine. Bishop d6 was played in the game. I think it's a more active posting for the bishop. This is my favorite move here. Other moves worth considering. So knight d5, whenever a bishop goes to e3 or f4, I can't click, but whenever it goes there, think about knight d5. That's a good cue that knight d5 might be useful. We should always be thinking about getting our bishop out, bishop e7 or d6, get castled quickly. And then the other ideas to think about are, do we want to try the b6 development or always bc5? Now, c5 here just loses a pawn. White's bishop e3 controls that square extra. This position's not so good. Note we can't play queen a5, c3, bishop c5 due to b4. So we just lose a pawn. So c5 does not work here for once. And then the other idea is b6, but there's this bishop b5, knight e5 problem, and we're not quite developed enough, we're not close to castling to play it yet. So, bishop d6. Really like this move. It's the most active posting for the bishop. Alright, if you said b6 now, it is much better than it was last turn. Bishop b5 and knight e5 are not nearly as dangerous when we're just one move from castling out of pressure. b6 is perfectly fine, black castles, which is probably the best move. If you said c5, it still loses a pawn, so that would be a mistake. Alright, they still have control over c5, so there's really only one candidate move here, and it's a good one, b6. But the computer did suggest some other ideas here, and I think it's interesting. In the Hansen-Meier game we looked at last time, I can bring that up. Nope, that's the Hansen-Meier. Hansen-Meier. In the opening position, after bishop g3, I really liked Meier. Meier played cd4, rook c5, and queen c8, which was okay, but I really liked the idea of bishop f3, as we talked about, with the idea of forcing through c4 and playing on the b file, and black's much better. However, the computer in the opening position also suggests b5 as a playable move, just sacking the pawn, playing queen a5, and using the b file. Now it's hard to get there, so somehow, despite not even having access to the b file, black is okay here. And I mentioned that I think I said b5 wouldn't come up again. Now, b5 is coming up again, because the computer does not think b5 is terrible here. It thinks white's better, but black has some compensation, either with rook b8 or bishop b7 next, if white takes. I cannot figure out how to verbalize this sacrifice. There's definitely some b5 ideas in this opening, and I think if you studied them, you could get some really interesting positions and some interesting attacks. I have not done the work, and it doesn't seem obvious to me why this move would be good. Why white spending this turn, even for the open b file, has much compensation for black. So, if you're interested in these b5 moves, definitely check out this position and the Hansen-Meier game and look at b5 there and try to figure out what are the reasons why b5 is justifiable here. What's the follow-ups, and what might make me think to play it in other similar positions. Okay. Where were we? Aha. I made the wrong line the main line. Making this slightly harder to, Alright. Yeah. b6 seems like the best move. Okay. Here, there's really only one candidate move, bishop b7, finish development. Alright, interesting position. White's knight is nice on e5. Now, we should not consider bishop takes g2. This is just a way to get ourselves mated. That would be poor. Their knight's really good on e5. You can see why black is often quick to play something like bishop takes f3. just because this knight can really control the board. Now, black should have something else they're achieving when they play bishop f3. We've seen it combined with c4 to distract a defender from it. That's a good reason. There are others. But this knight is often really good, and this bishop actually doesn't really have targets, so it seems like the long diagonal should be excellent. The rook's going to move, and we don't really want to take g2. So, black's position has some things to solve. Now, if you said c5, always be c5ing, I'm proud of you. Yeah. It looks scary, but actually dc5 is a horrible blunder. They may win our queen, but we have won ample material for it. We have 2 pieces and a rook for the queen, easily better. Always be c5ing. c5 is justified here, even with our queen on this scary looking file. And given another turn, we'll probably play queen c7. Rook c8 is a move the computer likes. I'm slightly skeptical of this move. I'm sure it's fine, but my thought is rook c8 is going to combine with c5. If we can play c5 anyway, occasionally we'll want rook b8 instead of c8, so I don't understand why we'd commit the rook before making the break. But rook c8's fine. Okay. Black, however, made, I think, the best move, and quickly went, I want to go after this awkward bishop, and played knight d5. And this is a standard theme, and I've not talked about it so far, but against a bishop on e3 or f4, the knight really often comes to d5. I have mentioned earlier this video, but I have not mentioned it in prior videos. Okay, if you said c5, take half credit, always be c5ing, c5 is good. But Meier, a very clever player, not playing on autopilot, noticed this pawn is weak, and with my knight moved, my queen has ways to enter the game, and thus played queen h4 exclam, targeting this vulnerable pawn. Where to retreat the queen? Now, the 2 obvious squares look like f6 and e7, and a little more aggressive looks like queen g4. So which of the 3 is best? Now, queen g4 is probably going to win this pawn, but in doing so, we're going to have serious problems with our king. Queen g4 is not a good move. Now, the temptation might be queen e7. It's the securest square, it sort of supports our break. Seems like a good square. And you often don't want your queen too far out. But the reason you don't want your queen too far out is because the queen can be chased by things so easily. It's very unstable quite often. If it can find a stable square, then it should be happy to be fairly far out. And queen f6 is the best move, though queen e7 is okay, because the square is actually pretty secure. White doesn't really have a way to harass it. And it continues to support things like knight f4 or bishop f4 and some variations. Now, the next few moves I'm going to kind of skip through. White threatens mate on h7. Black offers a queen trade. Note that if queen takes, pawn takes, bishop takes, something like knight f4 I think is pretty good. g2 and f3, this diagonal is very loose, and if white takes, black takes back, black can go into an opposite bishop where white has this damaged pawn structure. White's up a pawn, but black's probably just better there. There might be something better here than that, but black has at least a kind of favorable endgame they can enter. So white played queen e1. They might have repeated with queen e2, queen f6, queen e4 first. Black went back, and now white varied with bishop e4. Okay, if you said c5, great, always be c5ing. Computer also likes rook a c8, but again, always be c5ing. Alright, this is a really important decision. We have 2 ways to take back, and one of them is much better than the other, though even with the wrong decision, black is equal, but the right decision in black's much better. So the obvious move is bishop c5, not isolating our b pawn. But it turns out the advanced pawn on c5 has some uses, and the b file is often better than the c file. So bishop takes c5 is usually an error, and it is here in these lines, and b takes c5 is correct. And so I think the first interesting move of this game for our purposes was this knight d5 idea, harassing the bishop. And I think the second one, well, maybe the second one is that we had this interesting queen maneuver after the knight came to d5, because the queen could come into the game, and that Meier spotted an interesting opportunity to go after this weak pawn. But the third is bc5. We get this nice pawn, it can be used to shove down their throat, and it opens the b file, which is very nice for us to target some vulnerable squares. But, is it a blunder? Is black just losing a piece? The knight's pinned to the bishop. Oh no! Oops, didn't mean to click that one. What shall we do? You should definitely pause and think about this one and try to figure out a way out. Okay, it turns out bishop c6 is actually just okay. If white takes, black takes, and these pawns are just going to be so strong. Black's fine there. But black is even better. I like rook a b8. If we're gonna just sack the piece, I'd rather, start targeting the weak squares. When the bishop moves, queen takes b2 will be threatened. The pawns are so good. White has no counterplay. Black has a wonderful position. And the move played in the game I really like as well. Rook fe8 with the clever idea that if pawn takes, and the bishop's pinned. So this way, black doesn't even have to sacrifice a piece, and they still have a very nice initiative. White played king b1. Okay. Black just brings a rook to the file. This knight's still not really threatened. Other reasonable moves, bishop c6 was possible, getting off the b file. Bishop f4, trying to trade off this bishop. We'll return to discussing that bishop. Rook ac8. I mean, to my eyes, rook ab8 looks very natural and good. And I don't know why someone would prefer the other moves. Okay, Meier makes his one inaccuracy of the game here. But I think his move is instructive and interesting, and I think so are the better moves. So the best move is a5. Just look to play a4. If they take it, we now have the a file, and their bishop's no longer covering a square like f4, which we might have use for. a5 is the best move. The second best move is bishop a6, just threatening to take on c4 and opening up the b file. Meier instead played bishop f4. And when a 2600 player makes a move the computer says is wrong, the first instinct shouldn't be, okay, 2600s make slightly bad moves. I mean, that's correct, but the first instinct should be, okay, someone incredibly strong at chess made this move. Why? What were they trying to accomplish? And in this case, this bishop is white's key defender. It's the only thing that defends the dark squares, and we have so many dark square types of threats. Their pawns don't control the dark squares at all. They are very vulnerable on the dark squares. Spoilers, we will soon win on the dark squares. And trading off their bishop trades off one of their key defenders. And I think oftentimes in attacks, players get the instinct of trades are good for them, bad for me. The fewer pieces I have, the harder it is to attack. And instead we should think more, which are their key defenders that I need to get rid of and I'm willing to trade for? Which are my attackers that are more superfluous? Which ones do I need for my attack to work? Looking at this position, black has this really strong rook file. They've got this bishop, not clear what it's going to do. The queen has nice squares. The knight has nice squares. This bishop, not clear what it's going to do either. It seems like these are the key attacking pieces. Now, for white, what defends their king best? Probably this bishop. So it makes a lot of sense to trade it off. And I didn't look up what white should have done against this. Black is still much better. This was not a serious mistake. But it's an interesting idea. It is worth noting there were better moves in the position, and if you picked one of those, full credit to you. Okay, white's move is planning, they want to be able to trade without allowing knight c3, so they're just controlling the c-square extra. Note that by threatening their dark squared bishop, they felt the need to, spend a turn doing something that looks kind of pointless, just to get more control. Now, black played a5, just nice move, looking to open the game up. White played g3, which is a mistake. Yeah, black's happy to trade these bishops. It's the key defender. And now there is a winning tactic. Note that our knight might actually be threatened now. cd5, ed5, there's no pin against the queen anymore. So finally, we might have to figure out something to do with the knight. And there is something excellent to do with the knight, namely check. Forking king and bishop. So white must take. If they take rook, then we take, forking knight and king, and we will win the knight. Therefore they took queen. Got to get the move order right here. Queen takes c3 would be a horrible mistake. Black does not win material. But by playing bishop takes e4 check first, the king is forced to go to b2 or a1, where the queen is pinned. Now black should not take on c3, and if you were planning to, huge error, after bishop takes e4, white resigned. But you should be planning there, bishop takes f3, the queen cannot take because it is pinned by this queen. And black wins a piece and the game, and Hansen resigned. And this is a nice game from Meier. He beat a 2600 player in 26 moves. He played, I think, very thematic chess if we quickly run over the game. I liked bishop d6, an active posting for the bishop. Then he concluded development naturally. He saw the bishop on e3, so he played knight d5. With the bishop on this awkward d2 square, this pawn's loose, so he harassed the pawn. Found a stable square for his queen. Here, always be c5ing. We've reached move 17 and haven't played c5. Gotta play c5 now. Correctly took back b-pawn, opening up the b-file, which was, ended up being very important to causing white to make these moves that weakened the dark squares so much and eventually allowed the knight c3 trick to win. White looked like they might be winning a piece, but calmly played rook fe8. White is not winning a piece. Nice tactical vision. Then brought the other rook directly against the king. Now traded off the key defender. And now had a winning tactic due to those weaknesses on the dark squares. And it turned out there ended up being a lot of targets on this long diagonal. So a nice game. Hope you guessed the move throughout. Because I think guess the moves are a nice way to get practice in an opening. People often use them just as a way of looking at high-level player games while trying to do active learning. Because oftentimes when looking through high-level games, you just kind of passively click through the moves and don't really think too much about them. I know I do. And I don't know how much I get from that. I don't know if that's made me a stronger player. But by guessing the move through games, there's an engagement, you're thinking about stuff, you see why different moves are better than the ones you played, and perhaps some of that has a better chance of sticking. So I like Guess the Move to do that, but I don't think people have done much Guess the Move for openings, and I think it is a useful idea because you get experience in the opening at a high level, and with getting reinforcement and learning from each of your moves, rather than just playing them and never thinking about them again. So I like Guess the Move as a format, and unlike a decisions post, we got to go, or a decisions video, where I just give you a bunch of positions and we make decisions, we got to go through a full game, which is always nice too. So this has been my third video on the Rubinstein French. I think we're getting somewhere. I'm going to make 2 more in this series, I think.